Welcome to Not Quite a Classic, where we discuss games that haven't quite reached the level of classic status. Games that might be B tier, games that might have been overlooked, games that aren't universally praised. Today we're looking at Dungeons & Dragons: Warriors of the Eternal Sun for the Sega Genesis. Based on the Hollow World game module, Warriors of the Eternal Sun is the only Dungeons & Dragons branded game on the Genesis/Mega Drive. It was released in North America and Europe in 1992. The game was designed by Westwood Studios, who at that point already released a few D&D licensed games, including the incredible and genre-defining Eye of the Beholder. Just forget they also dropped two turds in the forms of Hillsfar and Dragonstrike. The opening video shows that the kingdom of Duke Beric is currently engaged in a long, bloody war with a goblin horde. On the 13th moon, the goblins are set to make a final push on the castle, and the humans know that this is going to be when the goblins win. But before the goblins can strike, a violent void forms and expands, sucking both sides of the war into its abyss. The Duke's castle is teleported into a huge valley surrounded by impossibly high walls and an eternal red sun blazing in the sky. The goblins are nowhere to be seen in this new world, but the need to survive is still strong. In order to prosper in this new land, the displaced kingdom will need to explore this hollow valley, and the Duke has charged you, the player, and your party to begin this exploration. From here you get to create your party, always a fun task when D&D is involved. The game is based off a mixture of the original D&D rules and advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules. You have your standard D&D stats: Strength, which gives you a bonus to physical damage, Dexterity, which gives you a bonus to hit and a bonus to your AC, Constitution, which affects your HP, Intelligence, which affects how many spells a mage or elf can use, Wisdom, which affects how many spells a cleric can use, and Charisma, which affects nothing, probably. Unfortunately, a lot of the game systems are somewhat obfuscated by the old hardware of the Genesis and the less than perfect amalgamated rule set the game is programmed with. It's possible Charisma affects some spells, and it's also possible that Intelligence and Wisdom also affect some spells, but it's unclear. Entangle seems to always work whether you cast it on a simple boar or a fucking vampire, one of the absolute strongest enemies in the whole game. You know this is old D&D when some race options are actually class options. Yes, you have the core classes such as Fighter, Cleric, Mage, and Thief, but you also have Dwarf, Elf, and Halfling as classes. You'll find the racial classes as kind of alternatives to the main classes. Dwarf is a modified fighter with more HP and less movement. Elves are fighter-mage hybrids, and Halflings are thieves that, well, they're just thieves, but they're smaller. I'd suggest a team of Fighter or Dwarf, Elf, Mage, and Cleric. Thief and Hobbit are only really used during one dungeon, so you'd be better off taking someone more battle-orientated. After you create your party, you are thrust into a huge world with only one task: explore. The Duke's assistant Marmillion asks you to bring back information and artifacts to hopefully uncover clues about your new home. And from here, you just wander. You're free to go just about anywhere you want. The world map shows a few interesting spots, but despite that, you are free to just fuck around. I initially got this game as a Christmas present when I was 12 years old, and I spent the whole day wandering around without moving forward the plot at all. As you wander, you will often come across hostile enemies, and there are loads of them. I think there's something like over 100 different enemies to fight. When you engage in combat, you enter a sort of tactics RPG combat scene, and now you know why I love this game so much. Your party and the enemy take turns depending on initiative rank, which is something they never actually explain in-game. The game allows you to equip both of your hands at the same time, so you have multiple options during battles. Plus, you can go to your inventory menu and move things around during every character's individual turn. Character classes have different weapons that they can equip, melee weapons like swords, axes, spears, etc., but everyone can also use ranged weapons. All classes can either use slings or bows, and you should always have one of these equipped on each of your characters. Having a bow equipped on the world map gives you the chance to act first in combat every time. Just equip a bow or sling and walk around tapping that attack button. Enemies in this game spawn just off screen, and if you aren't actively pressing the attack button, odds are you will walk right into them, and they will get the initiative. Constantly pressing the ranged attack button means that as soon as an enemy is spawned, you will automatically target it. You'll often get several ranged attacks in before the enemy can even reach you, and if that enemy is a dragon or a giant, you'll need those extra hits. As you explore the new world, you will find dungeons hidden throughout the land, and when you enter a dungeon, your view snaps to first-person mode. The tactics gameplay of the world map disappears, and you are suddenly in what can only be described as a sort of pseudo-FPS style of game. You still have your 4 characters equipped with 2 weapons, but there's no wait time to attack. You can wander up to an enemy and just stand there and let it beat you to death, or you can rush up into its face and wail on it as fast as your finger can hit the button. And this is where the second important use of ranged weapons comes into play. You can wail away on your ranged attack button and let loose a fucking flurry of arrows or rocks. This is how you get initiative in first person mode. You're using those bows and arrows and slings to get hits in fast and furious from a distance. There aren't any real bosses in this game, but you have story-centric battles that put you up against throngs of hard enemies all at once, so any early damage you can get off is integral. Keep in mind you can do this with spells as well, but flinging off your spells like arrows or stones will leave your magic users empty and needing to rest ASAP, and some places are so infested with monsters that you're not going to be able to rest at all. Dungeons are scattered all across the Hollow Valley. Some are mandatory, but many are not. Some of these dungeons are so well hidden you may never actually find them. Some dungeons are hidden behind random trees or random stone outcroppings with little to no indication that they're there. These dungeons that are optional are usually filled with incredible treasure, but also incredible monsters guarding them. In fact, just in your hometown alone, there are 5 or 6 hidden dungeons stocked with all kinds of incredible loot like healing potions, magic wands, and +1 weapons, so you'll want to keep your eye open and check out anything that looks suspicious. Now, let me tell you about this game's soundtrack. It fucking rips. This is by far one of my favorite OSTs of all time. The music ranges from melodic and catchy medieval style music to straight up heavy metal. A lot of people are down on the Genesis sound chip and how a lot of musicians didn't know how to write for it, but the musicians in this game, Paul Mudra, Frank Klepacki, and Dwight Okahara, knew exactly how to write music with this sound chip. The bass and drums hit so fucking hard on this OST. Listen to a few examples. As you continue your exploration of the Hollow Valley, you will slowly piece together what's happened. You discover that you've been abducted and dropped into what is essentially a giant zoo for extinct societies and creatures. You engage several hostile groups including the Beastmen, the Lizardmen, the Azkans, and Dark Elves. Everyone in this world seems to hate each other. This is in part due to an evil entity underground called the Burrower who feeds on the minds of people within the valley. Just as you find solidarity with a peaceful group called the Oltecs, who live beyond a field of lava, blazing flames, and dungeons full of level-eating undead assholes, the Duke's Kingdom goes mad and runs off into the woods. Great. But our boy Marmillion has a solution. He's been able to sort out a summoning spell for a god named Ka the Destroyer, who is straight up a giant fucking Tyrannosaurus Rex. Summoning the benevolent dino when engaging the Burrower will convince the T-Rex to destroy the mind-bending creature. Okay, I guess. So you make your way to the Dark Elf Caves by going the long way, literally walking all around the outer sides of the map, or the short way by, yes, another hidden dungeon under the city. Like I said, this game has so much hidden shit in it. In fact, if you go the long way around to the Dark Elf Swamps, you can find upwards of another 8 or 9 optional dungeons. LOL. However you get there, the dungeons of the Dark Elves are absolutely fucked. At first, you're gonna fight a load of Dark Elves, which are mostly pushovers, but the deeper you go, the deadlier the enemies get. The last floor of the dungeon, where you find the Burrower, has loads of uber-strong, one-off enemies like an Afridi, the previously mentioned vampire, a chimera, and a pyrohydra. Holy shit. Remember when I said equip bows and slings? Equip bows and slings. Fireballs and entangles also help immensely. When you find the Burrower, you summon Ka and you get some cutscenes. Everyone goes back to normal, and the kingdom is positive that they can make some new friends now. Yay! And that is Warriors of the Eternal Sun. It's not a game that sits next to Shining Force 2 or Chrono Trigger, but it is a solid game. Especially since a lot of D&D games are shite and the Genesis doesn't have the biggest RPG library. You won't get a groundbreaking story, a colorful cast of characters, or unforgettable gameplay. What you will get by playing this game is a huge world to explore that has loads of secrets to find. If you want a game to slowly pick apart, this is the game for you. There is so much to find. Weapons, armor, items, hidden dungeons inside of hidden dungeons, and loads of classic D&D monsters. There is an owlbear dungeon. The game's not perfect, and that's fine because it is a solid, engaging play. You can squeeze dozens of hours out of this game if you want to go for everything, but if you know what you're doing and you want to rush, you can beat this game in well under 6 hours. It's not quite a classic, but it's unique and it's definitely worth a play. Peace.